make everybody aware of that. So thank you for joining us this evening. This is a part of PPNA's or Powderhorn Park Neighborhood Association series of town halls that we've been doing over the past several months. This one will be more focused on hearing from some of our city partners within public works and their respective works within, specifically as it relates to the city's Vision Zero strategy and planning, as well as special service districts representatives. I'm not going to do a lot more teeing up other than that, because I'm going to do a quick intro and then turn it over to our panelists to begin sharing with you this evening. So first we have Ethan Foley, who's with the City of Minneapolis Public Works Department and will be sharing tonight specifically around the city's Vision Zero strategy and planning. And then we also have Andrew Carlson, and David Bauer, and they're within the city's Public Works Department, and they're going to be more focused on some of the city assets specifically related to the special services districts and how that brings in additional services in key commercial corridors, as well as some overview of the city's new initiative related to cultural districts. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Ethan to kind of kick us off and to get going. Ethan, you have the ability to share your screen. If you want to go ahead and do that now, that'll be great.
Sure thing. Thanks, Tabitha, for having me tonight, and great to see everyone. I'm going to just get this going large enough here. So my name is Ethan Foley, and I coordinate the city's Vision Zero program, which is the city's effort to eliminate traffic deaths and severe injuries. So it's related to traffic crashes. And I want to note that I live across the street from Powderhorn. I live in the Midtown Global Market building. So my family is in Powderhorn all the time. We come to Powderhorn Park multiple times a week until my mom had to move to a nursing home. She lived right on Powderhorn Terrace as well. So know the neighborhood very well, and know obviously of the challenges and that we've been facing, extra challenges this year as a community, and also all the ways that community is coming together to meet that challenge. So great to be here to talk a little bit about our traffic safety efforts. So as I mentioned, the city has a goal to get to 0 traffic deaths and severe injuries on our streets by 2027. To give you a context of the challenge that we're working towards, if we look back the last 4 years, we see an average of 13 people are killed and 128 people are severely injured in traffic crashes on streets in Minneapolis. That doesn't include the interstate system. I'm going to talk about some stats just to provide some context here, but I think it's also important to remember that these numbers are people. They're people whose lives have forever changed, families whose lives have been forever changed, lost loved ones and other things like that. These are the names of people who died in traffic crashes in Minneapolis last year. A little bit of context, Minneapolis streets are safer than most large cities and most US cities and Minnesota and the country as a whole, but we still have a lot of work to do. So this gives a little bit of context of comparing to some other cities. I include New York City on here because New York City was the first city to take a Vision Zero approach in the US. And they may be unexpected that they're safer than we are now. They weren't when they started Vision Zero 5 years ago. And so we are trying to see progress similar to that and ultimately get to 0 as we're starting to see in some cities that have taken a Vision Zero approach in Scandinavia, even cities that are larger than Minneapolis. Some other context points. So we see that there are significant and unacceptable disparities in traffic crashes. So much of Powderhorn Park is an area of concentrated poverty where a majority of the residents are people of color. We look at that and we see citywide neighborhoods like Powderhorn, like Phillips, where I live, have a disproportionate percentage of severe and fatal crashes and very significant overrepresentation. We also see that our Black and Indigenous residents are disproportionately impacted by traffic deaths. Both of these things are unacceptable, and we are working proactively to address these disparities. We also see that people walking and people biking are overrepresented in severe and fatal traffic crashes. And that is also unacceptable, and people should be safe no matter how they get around. And we wanted to make it accessible and safe for people to choose to walk and bike as well. I'm going to get to the Vision Zero action plan that we're working to implement right now. I want to note that we did do some extensive engagement leading up to the creation of that Vision Zero action plan, and just highlight a few of the themes that we heard from folks. In a variety of ways that we reached out to people, we heard that a couple things. People are think it's very important. A lot of people think it's very important to improve traffic safety. We heard a lot of urgency around it. And we also see that it's sort of cut off for folks, but that people view our streets as generally somewhat safe or not very safe. When we asked people about their best idea for making our streets safer, we saw some themes pop out that we saw in other places in engagement. Really a lot of focus on traffic and focusing on streets. We also have heard a fair amount of dialogue on kind of all sides of the issue around traffic enforcement, which I'll talk about a little bit more. There's a lot of different opinions about that. And overall, we try to thread the needle around that in the Vision Zero action plan, which I'll talk about. When we zoom in on Powderhorn, one of the things I would note is, so that this map here, which I apologize, I don't have time to make an absolutely beautiful map for every neighborhood presentation, but this is a zoomed in version just looking at Powderhorn of severe and fatal crashes between 2007 and 2016. These sort of similar trends continue through 2020. If I were to include more recent data on this, you can see that black dots are someone who's walking, which are actually just over a majority of severe and fatal crashes in Powderhorn involve someone walking. Blue is someone biking, and then yellow is someone in a car. And we see overall that by far the worst street in Powderhorn is Lake Street, followed by Cedar and Chicago. And then what we call high injury streets. These are streets that have a higher concentration citywide of severe and fatal crashes. 38th Street, 35th Street, and 31st Street are also high injury streets. This is a very high concentration of high injury streets. It's eclipsed really only by Phillips neighborhood in the city. And so, yeah, problematic for sure. So the Vision Zero action plan I mentioned, we're in the implementing now. This is a 3-year plan. It looks at different areas of implementation. I'm going to focus mostly today on our safe streets work and talk a little bit about some safe people stuff, which includes education and communications and enforcement related things as well. So one of the big things we're working on is supporting safer speeds. I'm going to focus a little bit on new speed limits, and then there are other details that we're working on. Speed limits alone are not the solution for safe speeds. They are an essential part of the process. But we are working on a variety of other things to support safe speeds as well. So I just want to acknowledge that. Why we focus on speed so much is because speed plays such a critical role in severe and fatal crashes in Minneapolis and any city really. When we look at the likelihood of survivability, if you're hit by a car at different speeds, this is sort of the range of speeds we see regularly in streets in Minneapolis, and just the huge difference that we see in this range for the likelihood that you would be severely injured or killed if you're hit by a car as a pedestrian. We also know that it's just basic physics. It takes longer to stop at higher speeds. Reaction time is longer. And so there's more likelihood that you will have a crash as well. So we just finished implementing actually speed limit changes And so you've probably seen different signs come up. The speed limit in Minneapolis is now 20 miles an hour for local residential streets, which generally are not signed because there's just so many, but that's our speed limit for those streets citywide. For city-owned busier streets, the speed limit is 25, and then you will still see, and those are all signed, and then speed limits of 30 and above are signed on county roads, MnDOT roads, and a couple city streets. So if we look at what does that look, and I'll just note that the reason you see some of that variation is because the city doesn't have only has the authority to set speed limits on city-owned streets. So if we look before and after, before this change, almost all streets in the city were 30 miles an hour speed limit. After the change, almost 80% of streets have a 20 mile an hour speed limit. And you can see the grays are here are 20 mile an hour speed limits. If I were to zoom in here on just Powderhorn, the busier streets, which are those high injury streets, basically, Lake 30 or 31st, Chicago, 35th, 38th are 25. Lake and Cedar are 30 because they're county roads. So I mentioned high injury streets a little bit before. So this is just what they look like citywide. They do have 70% of all severe and fatal crashes, even though they're only 9% of streets. They're owned by the city, the county, and MnDOT. We are looking, one of our big strategies with Vision Zero is implementing what we call quick build safety improvements. So these are things that we can do rapidly to respond to the demand that we hear. And we don't have to wait for a total street reconstruction. They are typically done with paint or these plastic posts. Our intention here is we have a capital funding proposal, which is in the proposed budget that would fund including quick build safety improvements on all city-owned high injury streets in the next 2 years. That will include a number in Powderhorn, 31st Street, 35th Street, 38th Street, and Chicago Avenue will all see upgrades through this program in the next 2 years. I want to give a few more examples of what we're looking at here is, so we installed this, we were doing some trials to kind of get up to speed on getting to scale next year. We installed what we call bollard bump outs here at on 35th Street near Powderhorn Park on the southeast corner of Powderhorn. And this is something we can do quickly. And this is a proven safety improvement. So we will be coming back and installing more safety improvements basically along all of 35th Street and those other streets I mentioned. 35th Street is planned for 2022. I think we're still finalizing the details of which ones will be going next year, but that information will be coming out soon. We are looking at some things on Chicago and 31st and 38th, as I mentioned. We also installed at Chicago and Lake Street a couple different things here. This bottom right in front of us here is another bollard bump out, and then we also did some left turn calming treatments with those posts. So that's the type of thing we're going to be doing. These are proven safety things that we can do quickly, and we'll see a lot more of these in the coming years in Powderhorn to respond to the demand. I want to note from a community engagement perspective, we are going to be doing some community engagement. We'll definitely be getting out the word. We are happy to get feedback. And we're also trying to, a lot of what we traditionally get feedback in is like, should we install a safety improvement here or here? Which is more important? With this program, we're saying it's all important and we just want to move rapidly because we've been hearing from people, you need to make it safer. And so we're going to be doing that. Anything that will involve more impacts to either traffic or parking, there will be more engagement around, but I wouldn't anticipate a lot of the any impacts on that and anything we do in Powderhorn. We also, I know we get a lot of, have gotten a lot of complaints about traffic speeding in the neighborhood. That is up citywide this year especially, and we always get a lot of concerns and complaints. And I definitely see a lot of handmade and community-made safety things out there and calming things in the street, and it's concentrated in Powderhorn and Phillips citywide. I want to note that we are updating our traffic calming procedures citywide this winter. We will have we're really doing that because we know we need it to be more transparent. It needs to be more consistent, it needs to be more equitable. And we need to be able to maximize safety improvements and do more of them. That's really what we've been hearing from folks. You're not doing enough. We want you to do more, and we need to update our procedures to do that. We are planning to have draft updated procedures available for public comment sometime early-ish next year. We don't have a set date yet. We're still working on it. And then we would be adopting those by the spring and have those go into effect. A couple other things of note. So here's the top 5 unsafe behaviors we see on Minneapolis streets: red light running, driving under the influence of drugs and alcohol, speeding, unsafe turning at intersections. That's mostly failing to yield, like when you're turning left or right to a pedestrian or a bicyclist or another car, and distracted driving. We are trying to focus our education, communications, and enforcement efforts around these most unsafe behaviors. That's still in a process. We can talk about enforcement. If there are questions about that, I'm happy to talk about it. I will note that the city has a traffic enforcement working group right now that's sort of connected with the broader conversations about reimagining public safety. And there's a real focus on equity within those conversations, but also having how do we maximize safety benefits. So achieving both of those things, a lot of things will be considered through that process. We're still really at the nascent stages of that and waiting for a lot of the making sure we're aligned with the broader conversations about reimagining public safety. We also are looking at automated traffic enforcement. Automated traffic enforcement, most commonly through red light cameras or speed cameras, is a really proven traffic safety improvement, while also eliminating the potential of racial bias. Now, we know that there are still equity considerations and lots of other privacy and other concerns and considerations to work out on this. The cities, we're currently studying this. This is an effort being led by Public Works with a real equity centered focus and looking at other cities. And we need to kind of figure out what we think is an ideal approach. And then we would need legislative authority to be able to implement that. So this is still several years away. There will be a lot more community engagement. Part of what we're even studying is when and how best do we do community engagement around this, because we know it will be an issue that lots of people are very interested in when we get there. So those are some of the highlights. I look forward for any other additional questions. So when we get there, if you want more details, it's vision0mpls.com is our website for Vision Zero. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Ethan. That was great. I'm just going to ask everyone if you have questions to hold off on them, or we will get to them. You can already start dropping them into the chat so that we can get to them a little bit later in tonight's session. Next up is Andrew and David. And I think I apologize, guys. I think I indicated that you were within the Public Works Department and not the Community Planning and Economic Development Department previously within the city. But if you want to go ahead and take it away and provide a little bit of an overview of yourselves and your work specifically, that would be great.
Thank you, Tabitha. It's good to be here today. With me is my colleague, David Bauer. We're a small team working within Public Works. We also have a consultant that we work with on a regular basis as well, Michael McLaughlin. So broad overview, special service districts, often referred to as SSDs. We have 16 of them currently within the city of Minneapolis. Some date back to the 1980s. Across the country, they are referred to as business improvement districts. Here in Minnesota, we refer to them as special service districts because that is what they are called within state statute. So state statute allows for the creation of these public-private partnerships. So what is a special service district? It's a partnership between local governments and a business community. So a commercial district, a commercial node, a commercial corridor such as Lake Street. Lake Street, for example, has 5 special service districts. So the 2 of which that are closest to the Powderhorn neighborhood are going to be the Bloomington Lake and Chicago Lake special service districts. So we'll try to use those as reference points with regards to our conversation, but know that there are 14 other districts, and they all provide for a range of different services. So per statute and per city ordinance, all of our work has to take place within the public right-of-way. So we cannot provide services on private property. However, the services that we do provide are all paid for by those commercial properties. So it's a service charge, which appears on their annual tax statement. Those funds are then pooled and then spent to providing the services over the course of the year. So some of the parameters to which we must function under is that the services that we provide have to be enhancements. They have to be above and beyond the base level of service that the city provides. So for example, the city does not provide sidewalk snow removal. That is an eligible service that a service district can provide. We provide a lot of cleaning services, trash pickup, what we refer to as a pen and broom service. We also do holiday decorations. So again, using Bloomington Lake and Chicago Lake as an example, we do the holiday wreaths with the lit garland. Other districts do tree lighting, others do different types of lit fixtures. So we typically provide services year-round. Winter is dealing with snow as well as the holiday decorations. In the spring, we do a lot in terms of landscaping, planting. We maintain boulevard trees, replace them as necessary, as well as a lot of the planting beds. So we provide for a range of services, and those services are decided and determined by the advisory board. It's important to note that being a public-private partnership, those services are recommended by the advisory board. The advisory board is made up of commercial property owners and commercial business owners within the district. So they are essentially acting on behalf of their neighbors, their neighboring businesses, to determine what their budget should be and what the services should be and setting the frequency in which they are delivered. We just got through our annual budget setting, taking that proposal to council that has been adopted. And we're looking forward to starting a new year with that new budget starting on January 1. So we do work on a calendar year. So I kind of highlighted the range in which we operate with the 16 districts, generally in terms of how we operate and working with our appointed city council appointed advisory boards, my team with David and Michael, and how we kind of go about doing our work. I will say one other thing. We do hire a lot of local businesses through what's called the Target Market Program. The city's procurement office, which is a division within the finance department, prioritizes the utilization of local businesses, and special service districts are pretty well positioned in hiring local businesses to provide for the services that we need them to do. So that's a good match for us to identify businesses within the community, within the city that can provide for the services within the districts. David, do you want to add to that, comment on a few things before we kind of—
Yeah, I'll just kind of build off of the last thing you just said is in special service districts, almost all the work is done by a third-party vendor. So it's not city crews going out there and working. They do a small portion of the work that happens in there is city crews, but it's almost entirely a third-party vendor that we work with. So we manage all those contracts. We work with the vendors. That's kind of what the SSD team, me and Andy and Michael, we manage all the working parts of it, but it's all third-party vendors that we hire to do the work.
So we can keep, we can talk about service districts all day, but I think that's a good place to kind of pause and maybe, obviously we're here to listen, hear what your audience is interested in. You got public works kind of as a theme here with two very different topics, but again, some services that could, directly benefit the neighborhood.
Well, thank you, David and Andrew. We appreciate that. I'm going to jump into the first question that we have for each of you tonight. And this is if you each can respond or take maybe a minute or two to provide your views on this. But what is your insight about why certain areas of the city experience more congestion, more serious traffic issues, more litter, et cetera? And in the case of David and Andrew, meaning that might be translated into why are certain commercial corridors or special services districts more needed than not? And I'm going to share that question to everyone. I just put it into the chat so you can see that specific question. So Ethan, do you mind if we start with you and then David and Andrew can chime in?
Sure. Yeah, I can start. And there are, I think, a couple of factors that relate to traffic, both congestion or crashes, which obviously is my focus. There are basically two factors in that. It's the amount of people moving around and demand for moving around in a local area, and then the amount of people moving through the area that you see. And so what we see is, Park and Portland in the broader area, just outside of Powderhorn directly, are examples. Cedar to a certain extent bring quite a lot of traffic, not just to the neighborhood, but through the neighborhood. And so that is something that not every neighborhood has, or those roadways that are carrying more through traffic. A lot of most of the traffic on Chicago and 35th, 31st is a little bit more locally focused, and so starting or ending nearish the neighborhood, and so then it's just about how many people are moving around and how are they choosing to move around and how do they feel comfortable moving around. And so we have areas that have more people, and Powderhorn has more people than some other neighborhoods, and more destinations as well. And so, that leads to that. And when we look at, I get asked the question, I'll extrapolate from this question a little bit, but why do we see the disparities in traffic crashes so stark for neighborhoods that have more folks with lower incomes? And I think a lot of that is, there are two factors. It's primarily the volume of traffic, and then street design. And so those are the things, we overall as a city, we're trying to provide more transportation options. So people have real options and different ways they can get around to reduce traffic. And we're trying to install safety improvements on these high injury streets so that we can address kind of both parts of that and make sure that is having that benefit from an equity and justice perspective too.
Thanks, Ethan.
I would just add, Ethan touched on some interesting themes there, and a lot of what we're talking about is human behavior and patterns. I'll give an example. So, for example, if you place a trash receptacle at every intersection, and as you're walking down the street with that can of pop, you pass a trash receptacle for 2 blocks and it's in that same location. You finish your drink and you're thinking, oh, if I go to the next block, there'll be a trash receptacle there. I can recycle this empty can. So building in, predicting some of these human behaviors and these patterns, we can be more strategic. And I think the same thing, that's a simple example dealing with how you space out your trash receptacles, right? And having the resources to have enough trash receptacles so that people can anticipate that if they go 1 more block, they don't have to leave that on the curb, they can dispose of it properly. Same thing with good design for streets, right? Having that pedestrian have some confidence in predicting or understanding what that driver is going to do. Sight lines are another piece to that. So viewing, as Ethan kind of had in his presentation, everybody should feel safe, whether you're on a bike or a pedestrian or in a car. That level of safety should be equal to all. While we work with service frequencies, having that ability to adjust our frequencies. I'll give another example. If there's a new development that has several fast food restaurants or a convenience store, for example, those are just high volume, high traffic areas that generate a lot of trash. So ensuring that that trash receptacle and that all trash receptacles fill at the same rate. So we have the ability to say that trash can needs to be emptied every day, whereas the rest in the district maybe only need to be serviced twice a week. So being able to collect the data, analyze the data, and then apply your limited resources the most effective and efficiently possible is what drives a lot of our decision making on the part of our advisory board. So the services too, I'll give an example. Nicollet Avenue, also referred to as Eat Street, has a lot of restaurants. Their focus is on cleanliness. You know, they want to ensure a very clean urban environment due to the patio seating, the outdoor seating, so that when their customers come in, they have a positive first experience. Others districts may have more of a focus on, say, their landscaping because they have a high degree of landscape beds. So depending on the makeup of their district also is going to have a profound impact in terms of how they allocate their resources. David works very closely with our contractors and making those adjustments to how that service level is delivered. So he's, involved in that on a regular basis. David, I don't know if you want to highlight an example or just speak more to that.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, for example, Chicago Lake is kind of an interesting district that we have. It's a transportation hub. You have some restaurants in the area. And for example, that the one receptacle at the Metro Transit station, we're emptying that every single day. And in that area, we are also doing pan and broom service 3, sometimes 4 days a week. It's just a high traffic, high volume area. And the services that we need to deploy there, just the services that we do there, we do it more often than in different parts of the city for sure. So Chicago Lake is definitely one of the busiest places.
Thank you all. So the next question, because we're already getting some great questions from our attendees, so I want to get through the next several as expeditiously as possible. Please be mindful, if you can, keep your response to about a minute or 2. That would be great. No shade, just want to make sure that we get through all of this conversation we can. So the next question is, what are 1 or 2 key public works / Vision Zero resources that are high priority to improve livability? So this question is specifically for Ethan, and I'm going to go ahead and drop it back into the chat. So again, this is about, and you may have touched on some of this in your presentation, Ethan, but can you summarize what are those upcoming 1 or 2 key priorities that are slated for implementation that also is expected to improve livability and safety?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, everything within our Vision Zero work is intended to improve livability and safety. But I tried to highlight, I think, the 2 that I think are most of interest for folks and coming up are around our work on quick build improvements on high injury streets, and our work around neighborhood traffic calming procedures and the update and new things there, which is sort of like that's coming, and I don't know exactly what that means, but it will mean a clearer process and more implementation there. So both of those things are likely to mean you're going to see significant change in the next 2 years on the streets in Powderhorn with those efforts. I would also note that the city in the capital budget in 2025 and 2026, we are reconstructing 31st Street, 38th Street, and Chicago Avenue in Powderhorn. In not all at the same time, but in sequencing in those years. And that'll be an opportunity when we have sort of a blank slate to work with community members on what is the vision, the long-term vision of those streets, and how are we supporting city goals and meeting community needs in the best way possible for those streets. And a full reconstruct means we'll be reconstructing, curb to curb. We sometimes maybe adding, or moving around street trees or adding them if they don't exist, like they don't exist on 31st or 38th Street, things like that. So that will be a big opportunity as well. In the future, we will have a lot of engagement for those when we get there.
And just to clarify, if you wouldn't mind, even if you know, one, just to restate the years that capital infrastructure allocation has been designated. Did you say 2025 and 2026?
Correct.
And the street you said was 31st, 35th, and 38th?
31st Chicago and 38th.
31st Chicago. And then what are the boundaries? So does that go from Cedar over to 35W?
So Chicago will be reconstructed south of Lake Street. And it's in kind of a couple different years. So there are different segments. We may pull out the area around 38th in Chicago as well. There's been a lot of conversations about that. And then, so that's like a few miles of Chicago south of Lake Street. 31st Street will be reconstructed. I think it's from past Cedar. I can't remember the eastern boundary, but all the way to the other side of the freeway. To the other side of 35W. 38th Street will again be basically the entire stretch of 38th Street, most of the stretch of 38th Street between Hiawatha and Nicollet, I believe. So I can't remember, definitely the portions in Powderhorn.
Got it.
So.
No, thank you. Thank you for that. So the last question that at least we have teed up is for David and Andrew. And so the question is, how can SSDs be improved or expanded to allow more community stakeholders to participate, ergo nonprofits, other organizations, potentially even residents? And so I'm going to just make sure I put that question into the chat. So Andrew, do you want to take that?
Yeah, thanks, Tabitha. That is a question we do get a lot. We are guided by statute and ordinance that determine our approach. We work obviously very closely with our board, which is appointed by the city council. The fact that these are city appointed boards, all of our meetings are open to the public. So please, if you go to the city's boards and commissions website, the community calendar, you'll see all the service district meetings, well, soon to be up there for 2021, obviously open to the public. Right now we are 100% remote. The city software for conducting our online meetings is Microsoft Teams. It's a free app that you can download. It's the same technology you would use to view a city council meeting. So there's definitely opportunity to participate in that fashion and hearing what the service districts are looking at in terms of service delivery and budget issues and so forth. So I definitely would encourage you to sign up for our Gov Delivery account. You'll get notices of upcoming meetings. So please sign up for those emails, and that'll keep you well informed in terms of when they meet. You can choose them all or choose the specific ones that are closest to your neighborhood. In addition to that, we have close working relationships with our neighborhood groups. So if you're involved with your local neighborhood group, that's another outlet for us. Otherwise, just call us. If there's an overflowing trash receptacle or a street light that's burnt out or a bench that is broken, please call 311, call David or myself, and we'll see to it that those issues are addressed. There's a reason why we're located in Public Works, because we have that ability to work quickly within the public right-of-way. I will say this, we are restricted to working within our district boundaries, and looking at ways in which to expand our districts is always an opportunity. But please know that those services are paid for by those local businesses. So it is truly where the city offers us free of cost to administer the services. but the services themselves are paid for by those businesses. So there's only 3 of us, and we have 15 districts, working closely with the community. You're there more often than we are. So we do invite and encourage those types of communications, interactions. And if you have an idea, we're more than happy to bring those up to the board. David?
Yeah, all of our meetings, like Andy said, are public. We have public comment period. So we don't have a ton of participation always, but we're always looking for more people to weigh in and, give us some feedback, suggestions, and just, listen in and understand what these districts are doing. So.
Great, thank you. So the first attendee question is, is there anticipation, and this is specifically for Andrew and David, but is there anticipation that the businesses participating in special service districts along Lake Street will be unable to afford the fees for service in the near future? If yes, are there any plans for supplementing or replacing fees that are lost?
Yeah, good question. I mentioned briefly that we met with all of our boards back in July of this year, and had some real meaningful conversations with the board. We were very pleased that every district did approve a 2021 budget, and enthusiastically, I think, felt that this was the right thing to do, to continue making that investment within the neighborhood, within their community, within the commercial corridor. So we were very pleased in terms of that consistent response across all boards. There's a great degree of trust built into these public-private partnerships. We need to be able to manage expectations on the part of the board based on the resources available. And the board has an expectation that we deliver on those expectations. So a lot of these boards we've been working with for many, many years. And we rely heavily on them to be the spokespeople for that business community, as well as having a solid understanding of what's going on within the community. So while I'm not aware of another funding mechanism beyond the service charges that they pay into this, there are opportunities to seek grants and other resources to where, I guess I'll say it like this. Service districts are well positioned to maintain certain infrastructure. A lot of times we don't have the capital in which to initially purchase it. So a grant to say buy some new benches goes a long way, because then the service districts can then maintain them in longevity so that that asset is preserved. David, thoughts?
Yeah, in the past, we have partnered with the local neighborhood groups to get grants that overlap with our service district boundaries, and so that's usually the nonprofit entity that we would work with if we were to get a grant. So like Powderhorn Park neighborhood with Bloomington Lake could pursue like a Great Streets grant, for example, or that's typically what we've seen in the past. So. Yeah, we're happy to partner with neighborhood groups to work on grants to get more dollars into these areas. But just to kind of build off what Andy said, we met all of our boards approved a 2021 budget to maintain the same level of service. So we haven't seen a decline yet. I guess we'll see how this next year goes. We do stay in close touch with all of our board members in all of our districts. So we might have to make some adjustments. We might have to make some hard decisions, but right now it's been status quo, and we're doing the same thing we always have been. So I guess this will be a learning year, 2021.
Yeah, for sure.
I will reserve my question/comment until I get through the next attendee's question, and it goes, and this is for actually Ethan. What city resources exist for creative traffic calming? It's a two-parter. And is the city looking at ways to make it easier and faster for blocks to do community-driven traffic calming? And I just dropped that into the chat so everyone can see that.
Yeah, great question. That's certainly something that we'll be we are considering as part of our updated neighborhood traffic calming procedures, and we'll be interested in getting community feedback on when we have a draft ready. And we see the interest of this. Like I said, the interest of this is apparent when you were going around Powderhorn or Phillips this summer, right? We see it in lots of different ways. Especially in these neighborhoods, and this summer more than ever by far. And so I'll just be honest, from my, as a person who supports having good community and people being safe and comfortable, I was very excited to see all the creativity, and I thought it worked really well. Even though it wasn't permitted and it wasn't, all those things. So I think there are some legal realities for us as we manage our right of way that we have to consider when we legally put something in, and how we work with community. And it's something we're trying to figure out how we do that. And then a big part of that is the equity part. So right now, if you were to go look at our suspended traffic calming procedures, it was basically entirely about partnership with local community. Public Works would come and install speed bumps, as was our primary tool, if the local community would pony up the money for them. That's not a sustainable or equitable way to implement traffic calming. And we saw it lead to investments in some parts of the city more than others that maybe had those resources to bring to bear. And so that is not going to be a direct component of our future traffic calming procedures. But I really hope that we will have a way for community members to partner with us. I think especially when we see about how do you show that community ownership, helping with having it be creative, having something that you feel a part of and want to help, community members want to help maintain over time. All those things are an asset. We have some of that even when you look at like our alley speed bump program, which is almost always a partnership. And community members may store them during the winter time and bring them out and put them in, all that stuff is happening. So I think there's opportunity there. I'm not sure we're going to get it 100% perfect this year, but we'll be interested in feedback on how we come out with. And then for resources, right now, there are not dedicated resources in the city budget for neighborhood traffic calming. And so I think that's something that we may consider in the future. What happens right now is Public Works kind of figures it out, I guess. We try to, but that's something we're really trying to be clear of with these procedures is how much resources do we have available for neighborhood traffic calming in a given year? And then how do we prioritize that? Because just to be honest, the reality is because we haven't had a lot of dedicated resources to it, we generally say no because we don't have the resources to implement it in very many places. And then, so how do you choose out of thousands of community requests, which of the 5 that you implement in a year? So we're trying to both figure out how do we do a lot more than 5 and then have that be a fair selection process that really then takes advantage of the creativity of the community. So it's not going to be an easy thing to thread, but we'd be really interested in getting feedback on our draft when it comes out.
Great. Thank you, Ethan. So this is, I think, maybe the last question, and I'm still trying to type it as I'm framing it, but so I'll get most of it right in the chat here in a moment. But this is for David and Andrew, and it's somewhat of a two-parter, but it is in relationship to not only neighborhood organizations being a partner with SSDs and Public Works, whether it be for grants or other opportunities, but it's really about how do we get our arms around the total need so we understand the types of grants that would likely make a dent. So really where I was going is, has the SSD boards in partnership with city staff assessed the cost associated with the total need of additional support versus the gap from the actual fees collected? I can't imagine that all of the fees that are collected within each special services district actually equates to all of the need that is present. So has an assessment of what the need is been ascertained? And if so, when was that last ascertainment? And if not, is there a pathway to determining that number specifically for the SSDs in our community, so we can get a sense of how could we look for grant opportunities to fill some of those holes?
You want to take a stab at this one first, Andy?
These are really good questions. I think, you know, the need is far exceeding our ability in terms of meeting that. And I don't want to say that as a I think our board members have a good sense of setting goals and, you know, making incremental progress towards a common objective. And you achieve that not with one-time money. You do that with sustained funding over a very long period of time. Service districts are positioned to be a player in providing for that long-term sustained level of service. Quick example is the board takes starting a new service under advisement very seriously, because they know once you start a service, it's very difficult to then stop it, because you've now set an expectation that this is now our new normal. If the expectation is that there is no trash on the sidewalk or in the gutter, then you need to be able to maintain that level of service. And that, of course, has budget implications. So it's having a very realistic understanding of what you can achieve with the resources you have, knowing you can always do better. I mean, we're not going to achieve a Disneyland level of cleanliness. We don't have the multi-million dollars, you know, to remove every gum spot from the sidewalk. That is not a standard that we have set. But to where, you know, we don't accept overflowing trash receptacles. If those calls do come in, they are emptied within 24 hours of receiving the complaint. So we try to manage a certain level of service and community expectation. And if we can't quite meet the need as, say, a resident brings forward, we have a rationale as to why. And we bring those comments back to the board so that they can be discussed. So why we do try to achieve a certain level of excellence based on the resources and the skills that our vendors bring to this work, we know that through our means of communication, that level is meeting the expectations of primarily our board and the ratepayers that are contributing for these services. That was a lot of words that I said right there, because it is something that as we gather data and analyze information and are looking at the metrics and the changing of the environment, requires a coordinated effort on all of our, on everyone's part. But it's really, if I could leave you with one point, is just having that sustained effort, knowing that one-time funding just doesn't get it done. It needs to be something that there is a commitment behind for the long term.
Yeah, we do the maintenance in these areas and maintain the cleanliness. And just for example, Bloomington Lake, I mean, the way they budget is, you know, what are they comfortable spending that year? How many pan and brooms can we do? And typically, recently, it's been like 3 to 4 a week, you know, during the summer months, and in the winter, as needed. And, you know, we'll have some space in the budget to do a little bit more than that typical routine, but not much. I mean, their resources are limited. They don't want to spend, you know, they don't have the resources to have people out there every single day. But they're trying their best and they're doing what they can within their means. And approach they've taken is, they're trying to put garland on every light pole, and every year they'll buy a few more until the district's done, and every light pole has garland and a wreath on it. So they bite off little chunks as much as they're comfortable with spending, and usually it's pretty modest, but they've done a good job of over time being as equitable as they can across the corridor. But yeah, like Andy said, I mean, if we get a grant to buy some recycling receptacles, it's a partnership. With that grant money, has to be matched by the maintenance and servicing of those receptacles. So usually that's what the SSD, that's their contribution, is the promise to maintain and service those ongoing. So.
No, I hear you both, and I want to be cognizant of time, but I just want to bring a little bit of the conversation that we had prior to our guests joining us into the context of my question, is because absolutely 100% most entities or organizations or areas will never achieve the standard of Disneyland magic, but yet we can strive for Valley Fair reality. And some of that can only be achieved, right, is if we know what the number happens to be.
Sure.
And ultimately, I get through all the words that you share that currently the SSD boards and the businesses who pay into the special services districts are the client. And yet the client also is operating in community, and we are trying to figure out the benefit to community by having a special services district that has limited resources. And if they have limited resources, that's fair. We want businesses to thrive, but never knowing what the total need is, even if it's not the SSDs who should own coming up with that number. This is me saying Public Works should have that number, or someone within the enterprise should have that number, so that the community understands that SSDs or cultural districts or whatever asset is then designated at some point is only one of the tools to get us to a point where everybody on this call and everybody not on this call can feel the benefit and the value of the tools and the programs that we have in place. Because often, even if we're able to point to the fact that a trash can, we prioritize it not overflowing, the nature and the overall feel and the vibrancy of the corridor, specifically on Lake or Chicago and 38, is challenged. And I think challenged is the most prudent word that I can use in this particular environment. So this is me asking for, you said we can ask you for things. We need help understanding if that number can be quantified so that
Sure.
we understand what we're up against. So we don't get excited that the one trash can at the corner of Lake in Chicago is being maintained, when in fact, we need to say, we need a strategy that can actually maintain 75 and improve lighting and fill in the blank, not because all of it can be achieved, not because there's a silver bullet, but because we need to understand the hill that we have to collectively climb.
Yeah.
Fair enough?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's very well said. And that's the work, right? That's a piece to where that data collection, sharing that information honestly with the public, that's the work. So yeah, I think you're giving us some things to think about for sure as we interact with our boards as well as with our small little team. So yeah, please invite us back. We will take that under consideration. I think I've got a better understanding of what that would look like.
I appreciate that, Andrew, and I appreciate your time, David. Ethan, I appreciate your time. Graham, thank you for joining us from Councilmember Connell's office this evening. I know that we are past time, so I will not try to indulge further. Robin and Michael and Julie, and I think Megan was able to be on this call previously, so we appreciate your time as well. We look forward to hosting as many more of these types of conversations as we possibly can going forward as an association and service of the community. Thank you all for your time. We wish you the rest of a wonderful evening, and we will be in touch soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.